Welcome to our leadership journey. We are Mike Cloutier and Peter Yanuszewski, and our goal is to interview people leaders at different stages of their career, from frontline managers to CEOs, and extract the leadership lessons they've learned on their journey to help you become a better leader. On this episode, we had the privilege to speak with Dr. Brett Belchetz. Brett is a practicing emergency room physician in Toronto and is the co-founder and CEO of Maple, a telehealth provider that connects patients with a doctor by video, instant message, or phone. While Maple was launched in 2016 and grew steadily, the COVID pandemic massively accelerated the company's trajectory, resulting in a tripling of the client base in the span of 2 months. Prior to practicing medicine, Brett was a management consultant with McKinsey and Company. He is a regular commentator on health-related issues and is featured regularly as a medical expert on television. In our discussion, we cover the benefits of a meandering career path, why leaders need to listen to their team members, and how some of the most inspiring innovators of our time may be poor examples of leadership.
So welcome back, everyone. And our guest this evening is Brett Belchetz, and we're thrilled to have Brett with us. Brett, usually what we do is we just get people to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about your leadership journey. It's better than Peter and I making stuff up. So give us an idea where you've been and what you've been doing.
Yeah, so well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be on with both of you. And my journey is a bit of a random meandering path through a bunch of different things, which ended up where I am today. So my background was I'm a physician by training, and went into medical school at University of Toronto a long time ago, way back in 1996. Started medical school, and went into medical school to become a surgeon. Graduated from medical school, decided I didn't want to be a surgeon. Got offered a job at McKinsey and Company in the Toronto office, where I worked out of that office for a couple of years and had some amazing experiences traveling around the globe. But I think at the end of a couple of years of being a consultant, what I realized is I actually didn't really want to be a consultant, because I found that for my personality, I really like ownership of problems that I'm dealing with. So one of the things about consulting is that even though you work on very interesting problems, they're never your problems, and you never get to celebrate the successes as if they were your own successes, or live the failures the way that most of us live failures in our own lives. So a lot of the time, just finishing a project and leaving a presentation with a client felt somewhat hollow. I left consulting, came back, did my residency, specialized to become an emergency room physician, worked as an emergency room physician for a number of years in the Toronto area until about 2014, where I started to really get inspired by all of the difficulties I've seen in our healthcare system here in Canada, and all of what I saw my patients living and breathing on the front lines of accessing care in Canada. And so I became very convinced that there had to be a better way for us to deliver healthcare than the way that we were doing it on the front lines. And I was very inspired by my experiences helping patients using technology. So there were many instances in which way back then I was helping friends and family members by text message, by FaceTime video. I was solving their medical issues. And I had a eureka moment one week in 2014 where a whole bunch of friends and family members contacted me, and I helped them all. It worked out really well. They were super happy. I was super happy. They didn't have to spend 8 hours in a waiting room. And I thought, wow, how unfair is it that for people who happen to have friends or family members that are doctors, they get this amazing thing called virtual care. But for everybody else, they're stuck 8 hours in a waiting room to see a doctor. And so I thought, why don't we build a platform that gives everybody that ease of access, gives everybody almost the feeling of having a friend or family member that's a doctor that they can text anytime. And so in 2015, that led to the founding of my current project, which is Maple. And so Maple is a virtual care platform that we incorporated in 2015, built the base platform over the course of about a year after we started the company. And what Maple is, it's a platform that allows healthcare providers across Canada to treat patients across the country. And it's grown very quickly from a place where we started with no platform and no providers and no patients back in 2015 to a place where now in 2021, we've got about 2 million patients on the platform. We have about 1,500 healthcare providers practicing different forms of healthcare on the platform. We have about 125 or so employees, some based out of our office in Toronto, some around the world in different locations. So it's been quite a journey, and really just an unbelievably circuitous and unpredictable path that I would never have predicted 20 years ago. If you had asked me what I'd be doing today, I would never have predicted what I actually am doing right now. And it's really been an incredible joy and a privilege to end up in this place, which was so not the path that I set out to be on, but such a great place to be.
That's a wonderful description of your path. And one of the things that I saw, you had a bio written up, I think, by your alma mater, and I think you gave some career advice to individuals about exactly what you just described, that meandering career path. So would you like to reiterate something like that to our listeners in terms of, a lot of us plan, right? We like to have a 10, 15, 20-year plan, and you took a very interesting route to get to a very interesting place.
Yeah, it's good that you've done your research, because I forget some of probably the more interesting things I might have said to somebody along the way. So this helps to remind me of nice things in my past that might be helpful for others. So, I would say we all, not all of us, but many of us in life, we have a lot of angst around not having thought out everything we're going to do. And I've seen this amongst my friends, my family members. I've certainly seen it among students that have worked under me at different points in my career, even people that I've managed in my career, people who they feel that there's a grand purpose to their life, and they're very anxious because they haven't figured it out. And they're on this journey to find out, like, what's my purpose? What should I ultimately be doing in life? In 10 years, what am I going to be? And if I haven't found that answer, there's a lot of people who feel very, very dissatisfied with where they've ended up, and they feel that somehow they're a failure because they just don't know what they're going to be. And I think for me, what's really interesting is when I look at my career, when I was in medical school, I had this grand plan. I was going to be a cardiac surgeon, and thank goodness it didn't work out, because after one day trying to be a cardiac surgeon, I remember working with a heart surgeon in medical school. It was the most boring day of my life, and I remember just thinking, like, I would actually probably jump off a ledge if that was my career. And so had I stuck to that and said, this is my grand plan, I'm going to stick to it, I would probably be a very, very unhappy person today. And so if I look at my career, I would never have thought I would have been a management consultant with McKinsey. That was nowhere in my grand plan back in the year 1996 or any time in my previous history. And that was an amazing experience. It wasn't what I set out to do in my life, but it was an amazing 2 years. I learned so much. I met so many amazing people. I traveled to so many amazing places. And similarly, ending up even being an emergency room doctor was not in my plan, but eventually starting this company was definitely not in my plan. And so what I would say is that all of the things in my career that have been most interesting and that have been most rewarding were things that I never planned for. They were not part of a grand plan. These were sparks that came unexpectedly, opportunities that popped up that I just didn't know were ever going to be there. And so what I think my advice to anybody would be is, don't keep your head down and focused on a plan, because if you're looking down at that plan, you're not going to see the world around you and the opportunities that pop up. You're not going to see all the exciting things that you can do, and you're going to miss out on a lot of the joy of the unexpected different paths that your life can take and that your career can take. And so I think that the people that I've seen that are most successful are people that have done a whole bunch of different things in their lives. And the one consistent thing that I've seen amongst many of the most successful people is that they're constantly noticing the world around them. They're constantly noticing patterns of what happened in the day today that actually could have been different or could have been done better. Where is there an opportunity? What's the thing that I could do to innovate to make the world better? Or even in my career, what's the job that I heard about that I'd never thought of before? But when I heard that conversation and I was paying attention, because I don't have a grand plan that's the only thing I pay attention to, but I was paying attention that all of a sudden I realized there's a job I might want to do. So my advice to everybody is be open to the world around you. Be okay to follow a meandering path. And there's a really good chance you're going to find a lot more joy and a lot more success going down that route than by having a grand plan that you have to check off a bunch of boxes on. And I've seen this actually too many times where people spend decades for career advancement, and each level they think, just one more level, or if I finally get to be the CEO of the company, I'm going to be happy. And I've seen too many people that at the end of it all, when they finally reach the pinnacle of whatever that career is, they get there and they realize, wait a second, like, this is just not what I want to be doing. But then they look back and I think 20 years of doing stuff that I didn't like doing, that didn't make me feel happy on a day-to-day basis, to get to this point where now I realize it was all a mistake. Like, that's just terribly wasteful and regrettable. So I would always urge people who are doing any job or in any career where you're not feeling satisfied on a day-to-day basis, that the answer to figure out what's going to satisfy you is not to do more of the same. It's not to get more advancement in the field that you're not happy in. It's to really re-examine, is this even the right place at all for you to be?
Talk to me about, I'm just so fascinated by your journey, because I would imagine you finish the MD degree and everyone says, Brett, congratulations, you've made it, you're a doctor. And then you say, yeah, but I'm going to go consult. So what does that look like from your peers, your family, the people that are talking to you? You've dedicated the time and effort, and I'm sure it wasn't an easy path to take. And then you take that left turn at that moment. And the reason I'm asking this question, because I think right now there's a lot of talk about the Great Resignation. A lot of people are sort of rethinking careers. What should I be doing? If my employer forces me back to the office, I might consider a different career path. So, and maybe help people think about that decision the way you thought about it back in, I guess, 2000-ish.
Yeah. So first of all, I think healthcare, especially, it's an interesting path, because people in healthcare who are especially on that medical school path to become a doctor and to eventually specialize, that is the only path they see. And most of the people that were in my medical school class, that was the only thing they ever thought about doing, which was getting into the residency program to become a specialist of whatever kind of specialist position they wanted to be in. So for most of my peers, it was shocking to them that I ended up stepping away. And there were a lot of people really wondering if I knew what I was doing, because what I find about medicine in general, it's a very risk-averse profession. Now, obviously, we get involved in a lot of risky situations. We're taking care of sick people, but from a career standpoint, it's one of the safest careers that you can possibly have. You will always have a job. You'll always have a salary. You'll never be unemployed. Your life is quite predictable. You know you're going to live comfortably. And so many of the people that I was surrounded by, even family members and friends as well, the answer always was, are you sure this is the right thing that you're doing? Because you have your future set for you. And if you become a doctor, everything will be fine. You will always have a job and all these other side benefits. And now you're going to go somewhere where, yes, it's interesting, and yes, it's exciting, but all of that isn't the case. There's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a chance, if the economy goes south, you could be unemployed. And really, are you sure you want to do this? And there was also a lot of, I would say, from some corners, not from all, but there was a sense of resentment from some, because the resentment was, how dare you waste that spot in medical school and then not practice? This was a incredibly valuable resource to train you to be a physician, and you owe it to society to now go out and actually use that training and help people. And so my responses to all those is, first of all, you have to decide what kind of person you are when you make your choices. So are you risk averse, or are you somebody who's willing to embrace uncertainty? Because if you're risk averse, taking the less well-traveled path, it certainly may not be the right path for you. You may actually cause yourself a lot of anxiety. And if that's who you are, being that doctor with the annuity income may be the better way to go. The resentment, when I think about it now, and at the time it actually did hurt me a lot, taking that, hearing those feelings and hearing those statements, thinking that to some extent, because I had taken up a place in school for 4 years, that my life wasn't mine, and that I must follow this certain path. And that was hard to hear that, and hard to think that people thought that of me, that I was somehow wasting a precious resource. But when I look now at my career, and it's now 21 years since I graduated from medical school, and since I made that decision, what's interesting is that sometimes it's really important to follow your convictions, because people don't know where the skills you learn will take you, and what those skills will benefit in terms of the things they can do in terms of societal good. So if I think about what I learned in medical school, and I did practice for quite some time. I mean, I was practicing, and I still practice from time to time now. So I ended up practicing. But even if we get rid of all of that, if I think about the fact that my medical education was what gave me the inspiration to start Maple, and what allowed us to identify that need and to create an application that's now serving the healthcare needs of 2 million people. And we, on an ongoing basis, are getting thousands of points of feedback from those patients talking about how this has actually transformed their ability to get healthcare. And we see people who are rural patients who have never been able to easily access healthcare, and people in cities without family doctors who have not been able to access healthcare, and people who are able to get specialist care in a rapid manner that have not been able to actually get healthcare, and a whole bunch of other things that we've achieved. And so when I look back at that medical training, that wasn't a waste. Even if I hadn't practiced all those years, that training, rather than me only being able to help those few people I see every day in the hospital, is actually allowing me to affect change for so many more people. So I think when people tell you or resent you for taking a path that might be the not normal path taken, those skills that you picked up are never gone. You've learned things, you've learned knowledge, you've picked up a part of the world that's always going to be in your head and will come out in different ways. And if you really go on an interesting path, none of that is wasted. And much of that could actually end up causing a lot more benefit to the world than had you actually stayed with the original career that you were training for.
One of the things that you mentioned in one of the pieces that I found on you was that you mentioned that the big obstacle to virtual care in Canada is that it isn't a covered service under provincial healthcare plans across Canada. So talk to us maybe about some of those challenges. Which provinces, how is this all working? And also, how does Maple fit in with some of the other virtual care platforms?
So in the early days, I think the biggest challenge for us when we got started was that there was no coverage across the country for any form of virtual care. So virtual care was something that governments didn't think was medically necessary. There was no fee code for physicians to bill, other than in British Columbia. Actually, there was one since about 2012, I think, or so. They put in a code, and that was for video visits only, but quite limited. But in the rest of the country, essentially, if you wanted to provide virtual care as a physician, the only way that you could actually get paid for it would be to charge privately to the patient. And so when we started the company, that was a big challenge because Canadians, by and large, are not used to paying for healthcare. And so we had two big obstacles to overcome when we got started. One was, is virtual care actually safe and effective? Because back in those days, nobody had seen a doctor online in most of the country. And so many Canadians actually thought, no way this could actually work. There's no way seeing a doctor online could be effective. That's definitely changed. The pandemic absolutely changed the perception of virtual care across the country. But the other thing that we found is that people fell into two camps. One camp was, I'm not used to paying for healthcare, and it's kind of okay that I'm being asked to pay for it, and I don't mind it, but it's kind of weird. And you have to persuade me why I should pay for it. But if you can persuade me why I should pay for it, I'll pay for it if you show me the benefits. The other camp was militantly opposed to us. This is Canada. Healthcare is free. How dare you charge for healthcare? We're going to call the police. I'm writing to the government. You're breaking the law. I mean, the things that we heard were just crazy. And so we had to do a lot of educating. And where we kind of landed across all of that experience was we absolutely wanted to educate people that virtual care was safe and effective. That was part of our plan. But what we realized was that in terms of getting adoption, you have to focus on persuading the persuadable people. You cannot waste your effort on persuading those who are unpersuadable. So what we realized is 50% of the people were of the former group, which if we could just explain the value prop, they would go for it. 50% didn't matter what we said, they wanted to firebomb us. And so what we learned very quickly is don't waste any of your energy ever trying to persuade that other group, because it will never, ever work. And so the realization came that 50% of the country is still a pretty big market share, and we should go after that part of the market. And so we did that, and that actually worked quite well for us. Now, the world has changed a lot. The pandemic has transformed coverage. So across the country now, in British Columbia and Alberta, there's now permanent coverage for virtual care. Mind you, it's only for video visits and telephone calls. So other modalities like secure messaging are still not covered. Across the rest of the country, there are temporary codes that have been put in place, which keep getting extended every year or every 6 months, depending on the province. We don't know how long those are going to last for. So where there are virtual care codes that are more permanent in nature, or at least have been extended for longer periods of time, we've started to take advantage of those and actually build the government, or have our doctors build the government for the virtual care they provide. In other places where it's not as permanent and where it would represent a really significant shift of our business to start taking advantage of those codes, we've been less quick to actually adopt it, because if we were to 180 our entire business and make it publicly funded, and all of a sudden those publicly funded billing codes disappear, that would be very difficult for us. So for us, I think one of the greatest challenges right now is the fact that so much of what exists in terms of regulation around billing is temporary, and we have no idea what the final world is going to look like. And when you think about how you make strategic decisions, usually strategic decisions are based on, you don't know what your company is going to do or what's best for your company, but you know what the world looks like. You know what the world looks like today, and probably what the world is going to look like in 6 months to a year. And this makes it really difficult because we actually have no idea on that really profoundly important point to us what the world is going to look like in 6 months or a year. And so it makes it very hard to make the right decisions and allocations of resources.
You mentioned something earlier about being, for a point in time, an emergency room physician. I've been lucky enough to have some friends who have practiced in that area, and we've never interviewed them here on the program, so I haven't been able to bring any of those stories, but some of them have recounted how the training in emergency led to some real value in the real world of the business world, in the real day-to-day operations of what you learn in as an emergency room physician, you can apply because of the fast-moving pace and different things. So is there anything you can share along those lines experientially?
I would say there's a few really big benefits of that career. So one is that there's not very many things that phase you if that's been your job. I've had obviously a lot of stressful days in this job running this company, and anybody who's started a company or even runs a company on an ongoing basis knows that running a company is just a relentless jumping from crisis point to crisis point to crisis point. It's, there's always fires to be put out, but none of those really are very severe compared to the level of stress that you deal with working as an ER doctor, and that stress is pretty much like nothing else that I've seen in my life. There's a level of intensity and demand on you that if you can deal with that, everything else pales in comparison. So that's really helpful. I would say the other thing that's really helpful to some extent, but also sometimes counterproductive, is when you come from being an emergency room doctor, you're in the hospital, you're almost like a general of the armed forces, meaning that you walk into that emergency room and that's your department. You own it. The team is your team to command. And you are deploying your forces around the department, and you're sending the nurses that way, and the respiratory technician that way, and the CAS technician that way. And you're constantly giving orders and figuring out the best way to manage this onslaught, because the patient flow coming at you is just an ongoing onslaught. It's an attack on the staff, and you're figuring out how to fight that battle. But one thing that's clear when you're a good emergency room doctor is you are the boss. It's a very dictatorial way. And that's why I liken it to being a general, because a good general doesn't have uncertainty in their orders. The hallmark of a good military commander is everybody who is under their command doesn't question the orders, believes unerringly in the infallibility of their commander. And that's why they do crazy things for that person, because they think they're always right. And you give orders very much that way as an emergency room doctor. You are the boss, and your order, your word is binding, and people must follow it. That doesn't work so well in a company. And I think one of the things that I had to learn coming from the emergency room and going into starting this company is I had to learn to let go of that, because in the early days, I honestly, for the first year or two of the company, I had a lot of that in me, which was I should give orders and people should follow them. And that's just the way that it worked in the ER, and it always worked out there. But in the corporate world, you can lose a lot of battles going that way. People need to feel in a corporate environment like the decision-making is collaborative. They have to feel that they contributed to the decisions. They have to feel that if they think you're wrong, that they can speak up. And many of the times there isn't, and this is the big thing I think that's really different in the emergency room, there's an incredible inequality of knowledge between you and the people that work for you. You know a lot more because you had a lot more training. And that's why them questioning you is probably not a great thing. And that's why most of the time you not actually allowing people to dispute what you're doing is probably going to result in a good outcome. But in a corporate environment, there's no reason why my idea for what could be a good product is better than anybody else's. And so, in fact, many of the times, the people who work with you will have better ideas. And if you shut them down and think that you're the boss the way that you do in the emergency room, you're going to end up with inferior outcomes as a result.
Is there a shout out to any leader that inspired you or anyone? We've had people who have kind of contemplated on that.
There's business leaders that I find very inspiring. But what I find most interesting, though, is that most of the leaders that inspire me don't have leadership styles that I would ever want to follow. And that's the thing that I always struggle with a little bit. So when I look at business leaders, everybody looks at Steve Jobs, a guy who absolutely defined categories, ignored focus groups, had an idea of how to get ahead of what the customer wanted before the customer knew that they wanted it, and just absolutely took a company from near collapse and turn it into one of the most valuable companies in the world. So incredible, but his leadership style is something that I would never want to copy. So there's lots to be inspired by, just in terms of his willingness to be bold, to not just do what everybody expected, but to actually try to get ahead of where everybody else is. But leadership style, I'd be concerned about there. And then another example, actually, to be honest, like a business leader that inspires me for many of the same reasons is Elon Musk. In that, again, category defining. I think if not for him, would the world be where it's at in terms of electrification of vehicles, which is, I think, one of the most essential things for the world to actually move in that direction. I think the sustainability of fossil fuels, we know, is very limited. And so this is just incredible. And he's the guy who made electrification practical and kind of sexy at the same time. That being said, again, his leadership style is not something that I would ever want to emulate. There are many things to question about it, but his willingness to do that. And then the other side as well is on SpaceX, like, unbelievable to see what he's done there as well. Redefined how people get to space. He's massively lowered the cost barrier of getting to outer space that nobody would have ever thought about a reusable rocket before him. So his ability to think of things that nobody has ever thought of and take chances rather than going down the safe path is very admirable, but leadership style questionable. So I do have this question in my head a lot, which is it inevitable that to have these incredible qualities of being willing to break the mold, to take chances, to do things that nobody else has ever done, is it inevitable that you have to have a very abrasive leadership style that may be quite difficult for many to work with you? I hope it's not. I hope it's possible to actually do many of those things and still be a likable leader that treats people respectfully. I guess time will tell.
So, Brett, this is actually a really good segue to the question we commonly ask, which is, so in your current role, you've obviously sort of shifted. You just described a bit of a shift in terms of your personality and how you've had to sort of behave in this new role. How do you want the employees of Maple to think of you as a leader? How do you want to be remembered as a leader of this company, of this team?
Yeah, ideally, I would. There's probably a few things, but I think ideally, I would want to be remembered as somebody who had really big ideas and really big visions that allowed them to actually have a career that was very meaningful for them, because they worked on projects that delivered outcomes that actually at the end of the day made them feel good about what they were doing. That would be really important. And then, secondary to that, I think having them look at me as somebody who operated with integrity and honesty and respect for those around me, both inside the company and outside, I think those would all be very important things as well.
Beautiful. And in terms of personal dials of you as a person and now as a CEO, things that you have to sort of turn up or turn down. You've mentioned one already in terms of that sort of like the thinking as a general going from the ER to the CEO post. What are other areas where you've had to sort of shift a little bit to fit this new role of yours? Any other changes you've had to make to make it work?
Yeah, so I think that personality of for sure what I already described, that personality of I'm the boss and I'm just going to tell you the way it is and you're going to do it. That was a very important and very quick shift in the first year or so of starting the business. The other thing that I think that I had to learn, and it's related, is that you can't do things alone in a company, and it's very much tied to not being dictatorial. But I very much in the early days would, for instance, like speak to a potential investor or speak to a potential partner and have an idea that maybe this was a path we wanted to go down. We wanted to take this investment, or we wanted to work with this partner. And I would go down the path of having a lot of discussions with these people and get things almost to a point of fruition, and then turn to my partners in the business and say, here's what I've been working on and ready to do this. And that never worked well. The partners always were kind of stunned that I had done that and hadn't come along for the ride and had a million questions and didn't know if it was the right thing to be doing. And in the end, what I learned, having done that a bunch of times in the first year or so of running the business, what I learned is that most of the time when I had these really important decisions to make and these really important opportunities to put forward, by collaborating on them, in fact, my partners and the people that I work with, they actually pointed out either really good things about these opportunities that I had noted or flaws in the opportunity that I had missed as well. And many times there were things that we ended up doing that I wanted to do, but our approach to actually pursuing that opportunity or that investment or whatever it was that we're speaking about got way better by actually collaborating as we looked at that opportunity rather than trying to do things on my own. And so for me, there's been a journey over the course of running the company to be more and more and more collaborative to whenever there's important things to be done, important decisions to be made. Even if in my head, I know exactly what I want to do, I want everybody to be part of that decision. And I want everybody to influence that decision and have the opportunity to change my mind that that's the right decision. Because a lot of the time the team in many areas knows more than I do, and they do change my mind. And so I think that willingness to collaborate, to listen has been a bit of a change for me, but it's absolutely, I think, allowed in this company for so many better points of view and so many more educated points of view to influence much of what we've built and allow us to be in a better place.
Brilliant. So respectful of your time and where we are in the evening, we're now going to enter what is arguably the most exciting segment of our program. This is the part of the program that Peter relishes and is probably reached, Herculean levels of excitement in our community. It is called the lightning round.
The first of which is, if someone wrote a biography of your professional journey to date, what would be the title?
A wandering path.
That's very apt. That makes sense. And if Wandering Path became a movie, who would be the lead actor in this movie?
Yeah, I think it's got to be either Brad Pitt or George Clooney, one of the two.
Good choices. Yeah. I see the resemblance. Great choice. Yeah. Okay, if you were going to write a theme song, or perhaps there's already a song that you think is already quite appropriate, sort of an anthem for leadership, what would be the chorus line that you think should be repeated throughout the song, like a sort of a message that leaders should consider?
Yeah, I forget the name of this song. It's an oldie, but it has this chorus. And I'm not even going to try and sing it because I have the worst singing voice in the world. But the chorus is, "If at first you don't succeed, dust yourself off and try again."
Yeah. Yes.
Brilliant.
Is it not? Was it not like a Aaliyah? Aaliyah was not a rap song, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's Aaliyah.
Okay, so you have obviously a number of employees. You mentioned Maple has grown considerably since inception. Are there books? Perhaps this is not something you do often, but are there books that you've handed out to other employees, new people on the team, perhaps colleagues, sort of around leadership, career advice, anything like that? What would those books be?
Yeah, I rarely recommend those books. I mean, it's funny. Some of my colleagues love recommending books, and I've read a few. The one book that I really recommend, and it's not leadership and career advice, but it's very much just life advice that I really recommend, is The Alchemist. If you've ever read that.
Yes, yeah. Paul Coelho. Yeah.
It's such a great book, and it's one of those books that I feel like people should just read every few years to remind themselves of the lessons in there. It's for anybody out there who hasn't read it, I won't spoil it for you, but such an inspiring book and just a beautifully written novel. So read it.
Where can people find you, Brett? If people want to follow up with you, they want to check in with what you're doing, how Maple's doing, where can they find you?
Yep. So you can find me on LinkedIn. If you look up my name, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter. I'm pretty active there. I think my tag is at Brett Bell, BRETTBEL.
So, Brett, thank you so much for joining us today. Tremendously insightful and a great reminder that there sometimes is a path and sometimes there's a path less chosen. So, it was wonderful. Thank you for connecting, and I hope our paths cross again soon.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me again.
Thanks, Brett.